Alright guys, now we're going to learn blueprints. What exactly are they? Why do you need them? And how you can use them to basically add functionality to your game. We're going to be covering everything from scratch, so it's going to be relatively straightforward. Let's go ahead and save everything in this project first. And then I'm going to basically close this project out and we're going to create a new project. So let me just close everything. And then we can open Unreal Engine again. So the reason I want to create a new project is because so that we can basically have a first person template, which will come with some pre-made blueprints, and it's just going to make it easier for you guys to understand blueprints. So let's go to games and let's get a first person template. Make sure to set the variant to arena shooter. Because if you get the survival horror one, it's going to be a completely different project and you're not going to be able to follow along. So just make sure to select arena shooter. Quality preset, I'm going to set it to maximum. Target platform is desktop, and make sure to set it to blueprints. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this Unreal Engine Beginner. Also, by the way, if you're watching this video on YouTube, this video is a part of a full course in which we learn Unreal Engine from scratch and we learn how to make a very good looking FPS game. So be sure to check it out. The link is going to be in the description. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and create this project and create. Perfect. And I'm just going to wait for it to open, then I'll see you guys. So you can see this is what we have. This is a project. And this is not really the level that we want to go into. So we're going to go into variant shooter. And then we're going to go to level arena shooter. So if you open this level, it's going to send us to the level that we actually want to be in. So now what exactly this is basically it's a pre-made game for you guys. If I just click play, you're going to see that we're just going to be like this first person character inside this world, and we can get weapons. So, oh yeah, this is a jump pad. We can jump. We can go and get weapons from here. And then you can shoot your AI enemies and basically they're going to die. And it's essentially a pre-made game for you. It's a template. It's a pre-made sort of blueprint, which you guys can use to build upon and create your own game. So that's the idea of this. We're going to be using this template to understand some basics of blueprints and how blueprints work. So what blueprints are is that blueprints are essentially a way to sort of program your game or code your game in a visual way. So you can think of blueprints as coding or adding, logic to your game, adding functionality to your game, but in a visual node-based workflow. So let me give you an example of how blueprints work. So you can see that we have a blueprints folder. If you open this, you're going to see that we have a couple of folders here. So let's go to first person and let's open our first person BP_FP shooter. Now what this is that this is basically the character that we had. If I go to viewport here, you're going to see that that's our character that we were possessing and we were playing as. And we have these different sort of tabs where we have some code which does, various tasks. So you can see that it's a node-based workflow. Everything is basically nodes connected to each other. And it is going to be super intimidating for you guys. I know it was extremely intimidating for me as well. Just seeing all this stuff at once is just super it just looks like it's difficult. However, I want you guys to trust me. When you are actually building stuff, it's super intuitive and it's way, way better than coding. It's much easier than coding. And I think you can get stuff done pretty fast and like pretty easily compared to actual C++ coding. So this is what Blueprint looks like. I just wanted to show you guys how it works and how it looks. Now we can cross this out and we can create our very own blueprint from scratch, and we can implement a functionality of, let's say, opening a door, for example. Okay, so let's go back to our content folder. In fact, let's go to variant shooter, and then let's go to blueprints, and here we can create our own blueprint from scratch. So let's right click anywhere, and then we can select blueprint class right there. And then you have a whole bunch of different blueprint types. We're going to be selecting actor for now. Actors are basically any objects that are in your scene that perform a certain task. So they're called blueprint actors. And pawns are actors that can be possessed and that you can control as a player. Characters are also similar. They have the ability to walk around, as it says right there. Then you have player controller, game mode base, and a whole bunch of different other classes, which we're not going to be covering for now. We're going to go over them later on. So let's go ahead and add an actor. That is the most simple version of a blueprint. And I'm just going to name this door. All right, so this is Nafif from the future, and I was actually editing this video when I realized that the concept of blueprint actors could be explained a bit better. So I'm going to try again, and I'm going to give you guys a better understanding of what an actor is in blueprints. So an actor is pretty much any object that you can place in your scene. And what blueprint actors are is that it's a special kind of actor which has any logic attached to it. So for example, think of it as a statue of a character versus a character that can actually move, that can actually be played by the player, or it can perform certain tasks. So that would make it a blueprint actor as opposed to like a regular actor. Actors can have different elements inside of them. So let's say actors can have a static mesh inside of them, which is going to just appear in the game, or they can have like a collision box, for example, that would control how other objects collide with it. Actors can even have, let's say, audio components. So for example, if you go near an actor inside your game, it would make a sound or something like that. So you can have different elements or different components inside a Blueprint actor, and you can also give it logic. You can also give it tasks to perform, and then you can make it sort of do different things. So I hope the idea of an actor is a bit better now. But even if you don't understand it fully right now, just keep watching the video, and I hope by the end of this, it's going to become a lot better. So let me just tell you the idea first. So we're going to play the game, we're going to go near a door, and then we're going to essentially just open it by pressing any key on our keyboard, and it's going to work just like that. So that functionality is going to be built inside of Blueprints. So let me just open this. And so now we're inside this Blueprint editor. And as you can see, we have different UI elements. Again, we have a viewport, we have a components list. This is similar to the outliner. So everything that is inside this specific blueprint is going to be listed here, just like your outliner. This area is called My Blueprint, and it has different sort of information about your blueprints. It has all your variables. We're going to cover variables in just a bit. It has your graphs, functions, and all that stuff. Don't worry about this too much right now. We're going to go over this in just a bit. And on your right side, we have your you have your details panel, where again, it's similar to this details panel. It's going to have information and different properties that you can tweak of any object that you have selected in the component section. And so if I come to my viewport, and up there, you can see that we have multiple tabs. So if I go to my event graph is where your actual code is going to be. Most of your code is going to be, unless you have different functions and stuff. But we can even close this construction script for now. We don't need that. We just need our event graph. You can see that we have 3 essential nodes here. I'm going to be explaining what these nodes do. The first one is event begin play. This node will be triggered. It's going to run when your game starts. So when you begin playing, when begin play, it just says right there, this node will just run once and it's not going to run again. This event actor begin overlap is going to run when any other object, for example, our character, overlaps with this specific blueprint. So this blueprint is going to be placed in our scene. Once our character overlaps with it, it's going to run this code, whatever code is plugged in front of this. Event tick, on the other hand, runs basically every tick. So every tick is essentially 1 frame. So if your game is running at 30 frames per second, it's going to run 30 times in a second. So if you want to, let's say, update anything, constantly. So for example, if you have a timer in your scene and you want to update your timer every second or every, tick, then you're going to connect your code to this node. What we're going to be using in this, however, is event begin overlap, because obviously when we get close to the door, that's when we are going to open the door, right? So let's go ahead and go to our viewport first, and let's add some visual elements. So for your visual elements, you can add pretty much anything. You can just go ahead and add a cube if you want. Just search for a cube and add that, or you can add any shape, or you can even get models from Fab. That's what we're going to be doing. So let's go ahead and go to Fab, and let's find ourselves a good door static mesh first. So I'm just going to search for door, and I'm going to go to price, the price filter, and I'm just going to set it to free. And you can see we have a lot of good options there. So you can pretty much select any door that you want. I think I'm going to go with maybe this one, door with handle. I think this looks pretty decent. So we can just add it to project and just wait for it to do its thing. And then once it is added, we can go back to our project. And if we open this, you're going to see that we're going to have a static mesh, which is the door. Perfect. So we're not going to add it to our scene. We're going to add it to our blueprint. So what we can do is we can go to add, and we're going to say static mesh. We're going to look for the static mesh right there, and we're going to add that. Now, for some reason, it automatically detected that we were trying to add this. However, if, for example, this door doesn't show up, we can just go to the static mesh property right there, and you can just select any mesh that you want, any static mesh. So that's perfect. Our door is in there. Our door is inside of our blueprint, and now we can write code for this door, because we're going to move the door and everything, right? So let's go ahead and compile this, and let's go back to our blueprint folder. And now you can see that our blueprint class basically has that door in the thumbnail as well. And now we can just drag this blueprint class on our scene anywhere we want. So let's say we add it right there, okay? And then what we can do is we can maybe create a wall around it as well. So I'm just going to go to add, shapes, cube, and then I can probably, because it's a door, we need to add objects around it as well. So we can, perfect. So now you can see that our door is between 2 objects, and Obviously if you were trying to animate an actual door, you would want it to rotate and stuff. But to keep things simple, I'm just gonna move it. I'm just gonna have the door move up, okay? Because that's, I mean, obviously it's not realistic, but we're just gonna move it up. So I'm just going to show you guys how you can build that functionality. So back in our blueprint editor, what we need now is a box collision. So essentially the way it works is that obviously this object is in your scene, right? But the thing is that this object by default cannot receive any sort of commands. We need a collision object so that when our main character collides with that collision object, then the code is going to be triggered. If that doesn't make any sense, it's perfectly fine. It's going to be clear in just a second. So we can go to add, and I'm just going to search for collision. And we're going to add a box collision to this. So once we add this, we can scale it up like that and move it up as well. So now whenever our actor is going to get within this radius, basically within this box, then the door is going to move up. Okay, we obviously haven't written the code for that, but we're trying to do that. That's what we're trying to do. So with this box collision selected, I'm going to go into my details panel, and I'm just going to go all the way down to events. And on events, we can see this event called onComponentBeginOverlap. So if you just add it, if I just press that plus icon right there, it's going to add this new node. This node is going to be basically the same as this node, ActorBeginOverlap. However, this node is specific for the box collision. So we're going to be using this. So you can see that this has a lot of different pins, and all these pins are going to give different sort of outputs. However, to execute code from this or to run code from this, we're going to have to drag off of this pin, which is this larger pin, which is called the execution pin. So we're going to drag off of this, and we're going to call for a node called add actor offset. Now we're going to add this add actor local offset. This node basically allows you to move your object in any way you want. So if we increase the Z value here, it's going to move, the door is going to move up in the Z axis. So that's what we're trying to do. Now you're going to be wondering one thing, how did I know that this node existed? There's many different types of nodes in Unreal Engine 5, and the only way you're going to learn about them is either by reading the documentation of Unreal Engine 5 or by just experience and just by watching tutorials, watching courses. You're going to learn about different nodes and you're going to learn about different functionalities. In the start, it's going to seem like magic, like how does this person making the tutorial know about this node? But trust me, as time goes on, as you get more and more experience with Unreal Engine 5, you're going to learn about more and more nodes. But for now in this course, whatever nodes I'm introducing to you guys, just try to like memorize them and try to like remember them, that they exist, and whenever you want to sort of use them, you can use them. So I can just set the Z value to 230. And now what's going to happen is if I compile this, make sure to compile your code all the time, because if you don't compile it, it's not going to apply the changes and your code is not going to run. So now if I go ahead and play, and if I go near it, you're going to see that it's going to open. It actually moved way higher for some reason. So we can maybe reduce the value. I'm not sure why it did that, but you get the idea that it actually works. Let's do like 150 or something like that, maybe. And go ahead and play. And if I move it up, you're going to see that it just goes up. Perfect. So now our door opens for us. So that's how it works. The only problem right now is that when we move away from the door, it doesn't close back. So we want to add that functionality as well. And that's pretty simple. What we can do is we can go back to our viewport, select our box collision, and right under onComponentBeginOverlap, we also have onComponentEndOverlap. So this is going to be triggered when we are not overlapping this box anymore. So we can just click plus on that. And now what we can do is we can just select this node, copy it and paste it here to duplicate it basically. And we can plug this back in. But this time our Z value is going to be minus 150 because we're going to bring it back 150 units. So this node is going to send it up 150 units. And this node, when the overlap ends, is going to send it back. So send it down 150 units. So now if you go ahead and play it, what's going to happen is that it's going to cause an error. And I'll show you guys the error first, and then I'm going to tell you guys the reason for that. So if I go near it, you're going to see that it's going to say infinite loop detected. The reason for this is because what's happening is that the collision box is pretty small, right? So when when the blueprint moves up, it ends the collision with the character, right? Because the character is not tall enough to still be colliding with the door. And then it comes down, and then it goes up, and then it comes down. It's basically an infinite loop. And the reason why that happens is because our collision box is too small. So what we need to do is we need to just select our collision box like that, and just increase the scale in the Z-axis, something like that. So that even when it goes up, it still is colliding with our character. So that's something important. And I know it's going to be a little confusing. Honestly, this is like a very niche and specific issue. So like, don't worry about it. Even if you don't understand it, it's perfectly fine. So now if I go ahead and go near it, you're going to see it's going to go up. It doesn't go up as much, so we probably need to increase the offset 230 and minus 230. Cool. Now if you go ahead and play it, and you're going to see it goes up, and then if we move away, it goes back down. So that's how blueprints work. Essentially, you can add functionality to your game. You can animate things. You can also add like timers. You can add, maybe you can add other characters and then have them look at you and then attack you, chase you and all that stuff. We're going to be covering all that when we're making our actual game. But this is just an introduction to blueprints. And I just want to show you guys how you can sort of, do different things. So another thing that I'm going to show you guys is maybe, let's add a cube. And this is also a basic example that is used by a lot of people to teach blueprints. We're going to have a collision box around this. And whenever we enter that collision box, this cube is going to change colors. So you can do that as well. So for that, I'm going to have to create a new blueprint class, actor. And I'm just going to call this cube. And we're going to go inside it. We're going to add a cube. And once we have our cube, we can also go ahead and add a box collision. So collisions are pretty important in blueprints because for your object to collide with anything, there needs to be a collision box. So just keep that in mind. And scale it up like that. We can set it to be the same size as the cube, or you can maybe make it bigger. I'm going to make it bigger so that we don't need to we don't have to go right next to the cube. And maybe even make it bigger like that. Something like that should be good. And so now what we can do is we can select our box. We can go all the way down to on component begin overlap. And then we can say, we can drag off of this and we can say set material. And then in parentheses, we're going to select the one which says cube because we're going to change the material of the cube. So that's that. And once you have this node, you can see that we also have this cube plugged in. So that automatically comes with it because that is the target of this node. So the target of a node means which object of your scene is this node affecting. So this node will affect this cube, if that makes sense. And then we can just select a material. So what we're going to have to do for this is we're going to go and create a new material like that. And I'm just going to call it new material. Doesn't matter. We're just going to delete it afterwards anyway. And then what we can do is we can say, just increase the emissive color. So make it bright orange, something like that. And base color, we can also make it orange or yellow. Cool. So that's our material ready. And it's called a new material. Now we can go back to our blueprint editor and just select that material. So it was called new material. Perfect. So now what's going to happen is that if I add this to my viewport, by default, this cube is not going to have that material, this orange emissive material. But if we go close to it, then it's going to have that material. So let's try it to see if it works. Let's go close it. Let's go near it. And you can see that it worked. Perfect. And we can add the same functionality to this as well. We can basically just say, select the box collision, go down, and on component end overlap, we can just duplicate this node, copy and paste, and make sure to plug in the target to be the same cube because we're changing the material of the same cube, right? So the target needs to be the same. And then we can plug this in and we can set the material back to, I think it's called default material or something. Let's open the cube and see which material it has. It has the basic shape material. Okay, so we can set it back to that. Basic shape material. So now if I compile this and I try to play it, it should only change the material while we're close to it. So we're close to it, changes the material. If you move away, it's going to change the material back. Perfect. So that's how you can, add different functionality to different parts of your game. That's how it works. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys understand this basic introduction of blueprints. So now I'm going to show you guys another example of how to use blueprints. I'm going to show you guys a slightly more advanced example. And in that, what we're going to do is that we're going to basically add a UI element. So we're going to add a heads up display kind of thing. And it's going to have a number. and then we can so for example, if you go near a cube or something like that, that number increments. So the reason why we're going to do that is because I'm going to introduce you guys to variables with that. I'm going to introduce you guys to casting. We're going to understand what casting is in Blueprints. That is a slightly more advanced concept, but I'm just going to give you guys a basic introduction of it. And I think it's going to be pretty good for you guys to understand how that works. So let me introduce you guys to a different type of blueprint. That is a widget blueprint. So what a widget blueprint is basically it's any UI element that is displayed on top of your game. So I think this also has a UI element. Yeah, like you can see the crosshair, this crosshair right there, and like this ammo and everything like that is, those are basically widget blueprints, and we're going to be adding our own widget blueprint now. So we can right click anywhere, we can go to user interface, and then we're going to select widget blueprint. So, and then just select user widget, and you can call this whatever you want. I'm just going to call this counter, because basically it's just going to be a number which is going to start with 0, and every time we go near this cube, it's going to update. So I just want to show you guys how you can sort of do that. And we can just open this counter widget blueprint, and if I make this full screen, you can see that this has a completely different UI. This is more like Photoshop or any other photo editing or photo compositing software. You can have different elements like text, buttons, and all that stuff. And this is basically used to create the UI of your game. So start menu, settings menu, those things are all made inside of the UI editor. So this is another thing that you guys will be using in Unreal Engine 5. This again is going to seem a bit intimidating. This animation, this whole animation area, we're not even going to need. So let's just cross it out. And what we can do is we can just add simply a text, and we can just drag that in. But before that, whenever you're making anything inside of this Unreal Engine UI designer, what you need to do is you need to search for canvas and just add a canvas panel on your, just drag it inside in the middle. And what that's going to do is that it's going to create like a boundary or like sort of like a canvas for you to add elements on. And that's an important first step that you always do. So yeah, just do that. Now I can cross this out, and I can just add a text. Select and just drag a text in like that, and I can just maybe place it like there, somewhere there. And then with this text selected on the right side, you're going to see that there's a details panel, and we have a whole bunch of different things that we can change about this text. So you can see the content of this text is right there. We can just start it with 0, maybe something like that. You can change the font, so font size, font family, all those settings you can change here. I'm just going to increase the font size, and you have a lot of different other options as well. We're not going to be covering everything right now, but later on when we're designing the UI of our game, then we're going to cover some of these settings. So now that we have this UI element created, what we're going to do is that we're going to have to display this, because by default, if I just cross this out and play my game, you're going to see that it's not going to be displayed. So there's a method to displaying UI widgets. The way you can do that is by going to your game mode. It contains the main logic of your game, and it contains sort of the logic that is run when your game starts. That's where that is stored. And how exactly can you access your game mode? It's pretty simple. All you need to do is you need to go to your details panel. And again, here we have some tabs. So you can go to world settings. If you don't see this here, what you can do is you can go up to window and then make sure that world settings is enabled. Then you're going to see it right there. And then you can see that we have this game mode override, and it's GM_shooter. That is our game mode blueprint. Now I know this is getting a bit intimidating and a bit confusing, but just hang in there for a second. It's all going to make sense. So with this, what we can do is we can just press this icon right there, which is going to browse over there in our content browser so that we can open it and basically modify the code in it. Now, if you look at this code, what's going to happen is that this node is going to be triggered as soon as the game starts, event begin play. What this is doing is that this is creating a UI overlay widget, and it's adding it to viewport. Now you might be wondering, what widget is this? This is the widget that has this crosshair and also this weapon, what do you call it? Weapon, I think it's an ammo counter or something like that. But yeah, so that is what it's doing. So what we're going to do is that right after this widget is created, we can drag off of this and we can create another widget. We're going to say create widget like this, create widget, just search for that, click it. And then in the widget class, we're going to search for our counter. So that's the counter widget that we just created. So just add that. And now what's going to happen is that it's going to be created, this widget, and we can drag off of this again and say add to viewport. Add to viewport, and the target of this is going to be the return value of this. What this does is that this tells this viewport node, add to viewport node, that we're going to add this widget to the viewport, if that makes sense. Now what's going to happen is if I compile this, and if I play the game, our widget that we just created is visible on our screen. So that's perfect. Now, how exactly do we modify this? For that, we're going to need a variable. So let's go ahead and go back to our blueprint folder and let's go back to the blueprint of our cube. So inside here, we're going to go to the variable section and we're going to create a new variable. And I'm just going to call this counter. And we have a whole bunch of variable types. But before we understand variable types, let me give you guys a basic overview of what a variable is. Variables are essentially containers of information that contain different types of information that you can change. Because they're variable, your information inside them is also variable. It can vary. And so in this case, what we're going to use it for is basically to store the number inside the counter. So let's say if we set it to an integer, integers are numbers basically. So this variable in the start of the game is going to be 0, right? But every time we overlap this box, we're going to increment it by 1. We're going to say the new value of the counter variable is the existing value of the counter variable plus 1. We're adding 1 to it every single time. And then that variable, the reason why it's useful is because we can take that variable and we can say inside this counter widget blueprint, this text is just going to display whatever that variable has. So this text will always have the text that is inside this variable, if that makes sense. So that is why we use variables. Now I understand this concept if you're completely new to programming, if you're completely new to game development. I know that this concept is going to be slightly confusing. There's no problem with that. It is perfectly fine. You will eventually understand it better. And I hope you guys will sort of get a better understanding as you move on. If you don't understand every single thing at this point, it is perfectly fine. It is perfectly normal. Just try to understand as much as you can and eventually things will become a lot clearer. And now let's move on to our variable types. So your variable can hold a lot of different types of information. Now, although in Unreal Engine 5, there's a lot of different types of variables, I'm just going to be covering the basic and important ones. So the first one is going to be a Boolean variable. What a Boolean variable is that it stores a true or a false value. So it's either a yes or a no, true or false. It's not going to contain anything else. The next important one that we have is integer. Integer basically has any sort of number, any sort of whole number, which doesn't have any decimal value. Then we have float, which is a floating point number, which basically is a decimal number. After which we have string. String is basically any string of text, any like sort of sentence or any word, which has alphabets. And so the ones that we just covered are the most important types of variables. There are some others as well, but they're way more complex. So I'm not going to be going into them just now. But the variable type that we want for this variable is going to be integer. So once we set it to integer, we can compile it and we can set a default value for the counter variable. So default value, we want it to be 0. That is perfectly fine. And then what we can do is we can say every time that we overlap with this collision box, after it sets the material, what you can do is you can say set counter. We can set counter to a new value. Okay, set counter, and whatever number you type in here, the counter variable is going to be set to that. However, we don't want to set it to a specific value. What we want to do, if you recall, is we want to take the previous value of counter and we want to increment it by 1. So for that, we're going to have to get counter and we're going to have to add 1 to it. And then we're going to set counter to that value, if that makes sense. So how exactly do you get the current value of counter? You can simply just select this counter right there, drag it in, and then it's going to give you an option of either getting counter or setting counter. We're just going to say get counter. And then if you drag off of this, you can search for plus. If you write plus on your keyboard, or if you write add, both of them work. Then you're going to see this operator node, which is going to be plus. And so basically what that's going to do is that's going to take the value of counter. It's going to add it to this number, whatever you type here. In our case, we're going to say 1. And then this output is going to go inside this new counter. So I hope that makes sense. What we're doing is that we're getting the current value of the counter, we're adding 1 to it, and we're setting the new value of counter to that new value basically. So I think our logic here is complete. We can just compile this, and now we're gonna basically bind this number to that counter variable. So what we can do now is we can just select that text, and also we can increase the size of this to cover the whole thing. Doesn't really matter, it just triggers my OCD. So with this selected, what we can do is we can go to our content, and where it says text, you're going to see this button next to it. This is basically the binding button. So if you click this and you say create binding, it's going to take you to this completely different UI. And here what's going to happen is that whatever value you plug into this return node, that is the value that's going to be displayed, if that makes sense. So what we want to do essentially right now is we want to basically go inside this cube blueprint, and we want to get this counter variable, and then we want to just plug this into the return node. Now, how exactly do we do that? Because we can't, if you right click and say counter, get counter, set counter, we don't have access to any of those variables. Now, that is something very important because any variable that is inside one blueprint is not accessible by other blueprints by default. We need to make them accessible. And the way we do that is by using casting. So what we're going to do is that we're going to right click and we're going to say cast to cube. Cast to cube. If you do that, what this node will do is that it's going to give you access to the cube blueprint. And basically, once you have this node, if you drag off of as cube, you can pretty much do anything that you could do inside the cube blueprint. So you can say get counter, and you can see that we have get counter there. Without this node, we wouldn't be able to get the cube. And then we can just plug this into the return value, and it's going to add another node automatically because this variable type, the green one, is integer, but the return value is text. So that's another variable type. So it's going to convert it to text. So it's going to take the integer, convert it to text, and then it's going to display it. So if I just organize things correctly, I'm going to have to take this get text, plug it into this, and then plug this into the return node. So that's going to be the execution pins. Those are going to be the execution pins. That's going to be the sequence to execute things, essentially. And now we also need to plug something into this object. What we're going to do is that we're going to say get actor of class. Now, this is a bit confusing. You probably will find this a bit confusing, especially if you don't know object-oriented programming. I'm going to give you guys a quick explanation, but if you don't understand it, it's perfectly fine. On a beginner level, you don't need to understand this. Just know that we have to do this. And eventually it's going to make sense to you. Trust me. The reason why we do this is because this cube is a class. It's not an object. And this instance inside the game is an object. So we need to get that object of this class. Again, if that made no sense to you, it's perfectly fine. It is a bit complex. You don't need to understand it at a basic level. You will eventually understand it. Trust me. And yeah, we can just plug this in here and this in there because we need to access this node first and select class. We're going to set cube. Once we compile this, if we go back and play our game, now our logic should work. So if I go near the cube, it lights up. And also you can see on the top left-hand side, our counter is set to 1. Now if I go back and if I go near it again, it's set to 2. So you can see that's how the logic works. And yeah, so that's how blueprints work. Now I know that last part that we covered is pretty confusing, especially if you're a beginner. It is going to be confusing for you, but it's perfectly fine. As time goes on, you will definitely start to understand more of these things. So don't get demotivated if you don't understand it, and don't sort of like beat yourself over it. I feel like most people don't understand it when they start learning Unreal Engine 5. I personally didn't understand it at all. Like the whole concept of casting was super complex for me, especially because I was like 14 when I was learning it. So yeah, it just fried my brain completely. I hope you guys understood at least something from this part. And I know it's complex. I know blueprints are slightly more complex than some of the other topics that we've been covering. But just trust me, it's going to get better with time. With that being said, let's move on to the next part.